Welcome to your cybersecurity deep dive. Looks like we've got quite the mix of material you've given us this time.
Yeah.
We've got certification guides, we've got these cheat sheet kind of quick reference things, even some thought pieces.
Yeah, it's a good mix.
It really does seem like you're going for the full picture here.
Absolutely, from the ground up.
Yeah.
It's a very fascinating landscape to explore these days and very relevant to everyone.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're here for, to make sure that by the end of this, you feel really confident in the core principles, the terminology, the real world stuff when it comes to cybersecurity.
For sure.
Whether you're, prepping for a meeting or just brushing up or even just curious, I think we've got some good stuff to cover here.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole thing.
Okay.
Where do we even begin? What's the foundation of all things cybersecurity?
Well, I think the main thing to remember is cybersecurity is about protecting valuable assets.
Okay.
And that doesn't just mean physical things like your laptop or company server.
Right. Yeah, it's the data too, right?
Exactly.
All that stuff. Customer info, financial records, intellectual property, all that's so valuable in today's world.
Yeah, it's a very crucial part.
Yeah.
And so the cornerstone of how we protect those assets is known as the CIA triad.
Oh, the CIA triad. Sounds kind of cloak and dagger.
Well, maybe not that dramatic,
Okay.
but it definitely is foundational.
Okay.
CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Okay.
Think of it as like the 3 pillars of information security.
Okay, I like it. Break it down for me.
So let's start with confidentiality. Think about a few years ago when that credit reporting agency had that data breach. Millions of people's information was exposed, and it led to all that identity theft and financial chaos.
Oh, yeah.
That's a classic example of failure to maintain confidentiality.
Yeah, that makes sense. So confidentiality is all about keeping that sensitive information, secret and only accessible to those who are authorized.
Right.
Okay, so what about integrity? How does that fit in?
Imagine you're transferring money online, and a hacker is able to alter the amount you're sending without you knowing.
Oh?
So suddenly you're sending $10,000 instead of $100.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, that would be violating the integrity of the transaction.
Got it.
So integrity is about ensuring that information remains accurate and unaltered, just as it should be.
Yeah, just like it should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about availability?
Availability, that's our 3rd pillar, is just as crucial. Remember that time when that major social media platform went offline for hours?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It was chaos.
Yeah.
Businesses lost revenue, people were disconnected. That is a good example of an availability failure.
So availability basically means those systems, that information, is accessible to whoever needs it whenever they need it.
Exactly.
It's like the reliability factor.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay. Yeah, these principles, obviously, they apply to the physical world, but they really come into play online, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it makes you think it's not just about fancy tech.
Right.
It's about trust and reliability.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. So is that where the idea of defense in depth comes in?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I saw that in our materials.
Yes.
Multiple layers of protection, so if one fails,
Yeah.
there's backup.
Right. Yeah. So you're not just relying on one thing.
Okay, yeah.
It's like having a fence, a moat, and a guard dog.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about things like job rotation?
Yeah.
Separation of duties?
Mm-hmm.
Those seem a little more, administrative, I guess.
Right.
But they were in our materials.
Yeah, they might seem that way, but they're very important. Job rotation, for example, helps prevent any single person from having too much control over sensitive information. So say if someone went rogue, the impact would be limited.
That's a good point, yeah. And separation of duties, that's kind of the same idea, right? Like splitting up important tasks.
Exactly.
So no one person has too much power.
Checks and balances.
Yeah.
It's all about checks and balances. And these simple practices, they have a huge impact.
It really is a good reminder that it's not just the tech. It's all those processes and policies and people working together.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on, there's one more concept we need to touch on. Risk.
Oh, boy. Everyone always talks about cybersecurity risks.
It's not about being scared. It's about being informed.
Okay, that's fair.
So in cybersecurity, you often hear about risk assessment and risk analysis.
Okay.
And it's important to understand the difference.
Yeah, those sound super similar.
They do, but think of risk assessment as taking inventory.
Okay.
It's identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, what could go wrong, what weaknesses might be exploited.
So pinpointing the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And risk analysis takes it a step further.
Okay.
It tries to figure out how likely those risks are to actually happen
Okay.
and what the potential damage would be.
So it's like understanding how bad it could get if things went
Exactly.
wrong.
Yeah, and once you understand those risks, you can prioritize, right?
Okay,
You
yeah.
can put the right security measures in place.
So we've got the foundation, CIA triad, defense in depth, understanding risk. But let's get to the good stuff.
Okay.
What are the actual dangers out there?
Well, the materials you gave us do a good job of breaking it down
Okay.
between the physical and the digital.
I have to admit, that section on natural threats, it surprised me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fires, floods, earthquakes.
It's easy to overlook,
Yeah,
but they can be just as devastating as any cyber attack.
that's true.
If a fire breaks out in a data center, for example, it could destroy servers, lead to significant downtime.
Right.
And even something like extreme heat can be a threat.
Yeah, they talked about the Curie temperature.
Yes.
Something about magnetic storage devices.
Yes, so the Curie temperature is the point at which magnetic materials lose their permanent magnetic properties.
Yeah.
And that's very important for data centers.
Yeah, I can see that. Even a small temperature change could be disastrous. Wow. But then you've also got, the man-made threats, the politically motivated ones.
Right, those are important to consider too.
Things like vandalism, terrorism, even war, right?
Exactly. A disgruntled employee, for example, could intentionally damage equipment,
Right.
sabotage data, or a politically motivated group, they could launch a cyber attack
Right.
on critical infrastructure. Those are real threats.
There's a lot.
Yeah,
But then there's also all the digital stuff, malware, social engineering.
right. Those always seem to be in the news.
They do, for good reason, I guess. What is malware exactly? I know it's like viruses and stuff.
Yeah, so malware includes things like viruses, worms, Trojan horses, botnets.
Okay.
Basically, anything designed to infiltrate and disrupt a computer system.
So it's like the digital common cold,
That's a good way to think about it.
except way worse.
But instead of a runny nose, you get stolen data, crashed systems, ransomware.
Right. Yeah, much worse.
And then there's social engineering, which is really about tricking people into giving up information or access to systems.
It's the manipulation that gets me.
Right.
It's not about breaking in. It's about getting someone to open the door for you.
Exactly. Like phishing emails, for example.
Oh, yeah. Those are always tricky.
They impersonate legitimate organizations or individuals
Yeah,
to trick you into clicking a link or downloading something.
right. It's always people the weak link.
Exactly, which is
Yeah.
why security awareness training is so important.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about teaching people how to spot those red flags.
So we've got all these threats, natural disasters to cyber attacks.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. How do we even defend against all this?
Well, there are different types of controls, like we talked about before: administrative, logical, physical.
Right.
Think of it as a layered approach to security.
Oh.
Administrative controls are policies, procedures, guidelines.
Okay, so it's like setting the rules of the game.
Yeah, making sure everyone knows how to play.
Okay.
Logical controls, those are the technical measures, like firewalls, intrusion detection systems, encryption.
So that's the digital defense.
Yeah, and then finally you have the physical controls, the tangible measures.
Like security guards, locks, cameras. That seems almost old school.
They might seem that way, but they're still very important.
I guess so, yeah. What if someone just walks into a data center and steals a hard drive?
Exactly. Physical security is still crucial.
It all has to work together.
Absolutely. And by using all these different types of controls, organizations can really create a strong security posture.
It sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is, but it's necessary.
Okay, I'm with you. We've got the why of cybersecurity, the what in terms of threats, and even some of the how with these controls.
It's a good start.
It is, but I'm ready to go deeper.
Mm,
Ready when you are.
let's do it. Welcome back.
All right, so last time we really laid down some good groundwork. The why of cybersecurity, the what in terms of all those threats out there, and you even started to touch on the how, right? With those different types of controls.
Exactly. The administrative, logical, and physical.
All working together for that layered defense.
Yeah, it's a lot, but honestly, I'm most curious about those logical controls.
Okay,
Our materials had a whole section on cryptography,
right.
and I'll admit it's always kind of sounded like magic to me.
It does have that kind of a mystique to it,
Yeah.
but it's really about using math to protect information,
Okay.
transforming data to make it unreadable without the right key.
So basically, a really powerful secret code.
In essence, yes. It ensures confidentiality, keeping things secret, but also integrity, so the data hasn't been messed with.
Okay, that makes sense. You mentioned two main types, symmetric and asymmetric.
Uh-huh.
What's the difference?
Remember our analogies from before?
Yeah.
Symmetric encryption, it's like that secret handshake.
Okay.
You and friend use the same key to
Yeah.
both lock and unlock the secret.
Okay, that makes sense. But isn't it kind of risky to share that key? What if it gets into the wrong hands?
That is the trade-off with symmetric encryption.
Okay.
It's very efficient, especially for large amounts of data.
But keeping that key secure is absolutely critical.
Got it. So asymmetric solves that problem by using two keys, right? One public and one private.
Precisely.
Uh.
You can give out your public key to anyone.
Uh-huh.
They can use it to encrypt a message, but only you, with your private key, can decrypt it.
Okay, now that is clever. It's like those mailboxes, right?
Right.
With a slot for sending mail, but only you have the key to open the box.
Exactly.
It's a good system. So I guess that's how we can do all this secure communication online, right?
It revolutionized it.
Wow.
However, it is a bit more computationally intensive,
Okay.
so it's not always the best fit for every situation.
Right, different tools for different jobs. Our materials mentioned all these different algorithms, like DS, 3DE, AES for symmetric,
Yeah.
and RSA and Diffie-Hellman for asymmetric.
Yes.
That one is just, like, better than the others.
It's not really about better. It's more about choosing the right tool for the specific job.
Okay.
AES, for example, is widely considered the gold standard these days for symmetric encryption.
Why is that?
Well, it's been rigorously tested and vetted, by the security community.
Yeah.
It's proven to be very secure. Plus, it has a good balance between that high security and efficiency,
Gotcha.
which makes it useful for all kinds of things, securing websites, encrypting files.
What about RSA? That one was mentioned with digital signatures, right?
Yes, RSA is a cornerstone of modern cybersecurity. It's commonly used in those digital signatures, which are like electronic fingerprints for documents.
Okay.
They verify both the authenticity and integrity of a message.
So it proves that the message really came from who it says it did and that it hasn't been tampered with.
Exactly. And RSA is also used in secure communication protocols, things like TLS, to protect your data when it's traveling across the internet.
Okay.
That's what makes online banking and shopping secure.
So RSA is like the workhorse of asymmetric encryption. What about Diffie-Hellman? That one sounded really interesting.
Yeah, Diffie-Hellman is all about exchanging keys securely.
Okay.
It allows two parties to create a shared key even if they've never met before.
Okay. Or if their communication channel isn't secure.
Hold on, how's that even possible? Wouldn't someone listening in see the key as it's exchanged?
That's the really clever part about Diffie-Hellman. It uses some math to let both parties generate part of the key independently.
Okay.
And then they combine those parts in a way that prevents anyone eavesdropping from figuring out the whole key.
That's some serious math.
It is, and it's really one of the foundational technologies for having secure communication online.
Wow, it's crazy to think that all this complex cryptography stuff is happening behind the scenes every time we do anything online.
It really is happening all the time. It's a testament to the people who've dedicated their time to developing these techniques.
Okay, cryptography is definitely blowing my mind a bit.
Yeah.
So what about access control? We touched on that before. How does that fit into all of this?
Access control is all about managing who has access to what resources and what they can do with them. It's like a digital bouncer.
I like that.
Deciding who can get in and what they're allowed to do once they're inside. Okay, so you're saying it's like a club.
Exactly. But there are different models for this.
Right.
You've got DA, MAC, AMG, RBAC, and Rule BAC. Have you heard of these?
They sound familiar. Can you break them down?
Of course. So DAC is discretionary access control. It's the most flexible. The owner of the resource gets to decide who can access it and what permissions they have.
So if I create a file on my computer, I get to choose who can read it, who can edit it, and who can't touch it at all.
Exactly. It's really user-centric, and it's very common in personal computing and less sensitive environments.
Okay.
Now, when you need stricter controls, there's ME,
Okay.
mandatory access control.
Right. There was the one with security labels and clearances, right?
Right.
It seemed a lot more, serious and formal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Think about things like classified information in the military.
Oh, right. Okay.
Only those with the right clearance can access certain data.
So the system automatically enforces the rules based on the labels.
That's right.
Okay. That makes sense for, top secret stuff. But for everyday things, it seems a little much.
I agree. So then you have RBAC,
Okay.
role-based access control.
Okay.
This one's all about assigning permissions based on roles, not individuals.
So instead of giving each employee specific permissions, you group them into roles, like accountant or marketing manager, and each role has its own set of permissions.
Exactly. It really streamlines things, especially for large
Right,
organizations.
where you might have hundreds of employees.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it would make onboarding new hires much easier.
Right, or if someone changes roles.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and then the last one was rule-based access control, or Rule BAC.
Right, and this one uses rules to define access.
Okay,
And these rules can be based on all sorts of things.
so it's like setting up if-then statements.
Yeah.
Like if this, then that.
Precisely. For instance, a rule could be only allow access to financial systems from 9 to 5 weekdays and only from company devices connected to the network.
Oh, so that's how firewalls work, right?
Exactly.
They check incoming network traffic and block anything that doesn't follow the rules.
Precisely.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It seems like all these access control models have their own pluses and minuses.
They do.
How do organizations even choose the right one?
It really depends the type of data they're protecting, regulations, budget, overall goals.
Okay.
Often, they'll even combine different models.
So it's back to that layered defense.
Exactly.
Okay, it's like having multiple locks on your door, just in case.
A great way to think about it. But remember, it's not just the tech.
Right, we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's policies, procedures, training.
Absolutely. Things like background checks, regular audits, security awareness training, it all matters.
It's about building that culture of security awareness,
Right.
making sure everyone knows how important this is.
That's key. Now, speaking of that, our materials also highlighted two important principles:
Okay.
need to know and least privilege.
Okay, remind me what those are.
So, need to know means that even if you have the right clearance, you
Mhm.
should only access information that's directly related to your job.
So no snooping around just because you can.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about limiting access, so info doesn't fall into the wrong hands, even if those hands are authorized.
Right, yeah.
And least privilege takes this a step further.
Okay.
Users should only have the minimum level of access they need to do their jobs.
So even within my job role, I might not have access to every system or file.
Correct.
Yeah.
The idea is that if an account gets compromised,
Uh,
the damage is limited
right.
because the attacker only has a sliver of access.
That's smart. It's like having different security clearances within a company.
Exactly. All about minimizing risk.
Okay, all this is really starting to make sense. But what happens when, despite all our best efforts, something does go wrong?
Yeah.
There's a breach.
Well, that's where incident response comes in,
Yeah.
having a plan for when the inevitable happens.
So it's like a fire drill for cybersecurity.
Exactly. A good incident response plan outlines the steps to take when there's a security incident.
Right.
It covers everything: detection, containment, eradication, recovery.
We touched on those before. Can you remind me what each step is about?
Of course. Detection, that's the first step.
Okay.
Recognizing that something unusual is going on.
Yeah.
This could mean looking at system logs for anything suspicious,
Right.
or getting alerts from security tools, or even reports from users.
So it's being vigilant, paying attention.
Exactly. Now, once an incident is detected,
Mhm.
you move to containment.
Okay.
That's all about limiting the damage and stopping it from spreading further.
Like containing a fire before it burns down the whole house.
Exactly. Containment might mean isolating affected systems, shutting down services, or even taking the whole network offline.
Wow. Okay, so you've detected the problem, you've contained it. Then what?
Then comes eradication.
Okay.
This is where you remove the threat from your systems. It could involve cleaning up malware, patching vulnerabilities, resetting accounts, maybe even rebuilding systems from scratch.
It's a deep cleaning.
It is. And once the threat's gone, then you move to recovery.
Okay, and that's all about getting things back to normal as quickly as possible.
Precisely. Restoring from backups, rebuilding systems, maybe even reconstructing data manually.
And that's where business continuity and disaster recovery come in.
You got it. Incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery. They're all related, but they have different focuses.
Okay.
Incident response is about specific security incidents.
Okay.
Business continuity, that's about making sure essential business operations keep going,
Yeah.
even during major disruptions.
Right.
And disaster recovery is about restoring those IT systems and data after a disaster.
So incident response is like handling the immediate crisis. Business continuity and disaster recovery are more about planning for the worst case.
You got it. It's about being ready for anything.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how all this fits together. But with all this talk about threats, it makes me wonder, what can I do personally to improve my own cybersecurity?
That's a great question. I think the first and most important thing is just to be
Okay.
aware of the threats out there.
Okay. You mean things like phishing scams, malware, social engineering? I feel like I hear about that stuff all the time.
And for good reason, those are some of the most common ways cyber criminals attack.
Right. So educate myself,
Yeah.
learn how to spot them.
Exactly.
Okay, so be cautious, be skeptical.
Right. And always use strong, unique passwords.
Okay.
Don't reuse the same password for multiple accounts.
I know. Everyone says that. But it's hard to remember so many.
That's why you should use a password manager. It can create strong passwords for you and store them securely so you don't have to remember them all.
Well, that's a good tip. What about those multi-factor authentication things I keep hearing about? Is that important?
Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is absolutely essential these days. It just adds another layer of security by asking for more than just your password to log in.
So, like 2 locks on your door.
Exactly. It makes it much harder for attackers to get into your accounts, even if they have your password.
Got it. Okay, MFA's going on my list. What else can I do?
Back up your data regularly.
Okay,
You never know when your computer might crash or get stolen.
right.
Having a recent backup can save you so much trouble.
That's a good point. I need to be better about that.
And be careful about what information you share online.
Yeah,
Once it's out there, it's hard to get rid of.
right, like a digital tattoo.
Exactly. And finally, keep your software up to date.
Okay.
Updates often include security patches.
Okay.
Those patches fix vulnerabilities, so you're making it harder for attackers.
Okay, all these tips are great. I feel a lot better about protecting myself online now.
Excellent. But keep in mind, this is an ongoing thing. New threats appear all the time, so stay informed.
Right. It's not about reaching the finish line, it's a marathon.
Precisely. That's what makes this field so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. This has been a great journey so far.
It has.
Learning about all these cybersecurity essentials.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot, from the basics to all those threats and the different ways we can protect ourselves.
We have covered a lot.
It's really amazing to see how all these concepts work together,
It really is.
to create this secure and resilient digital world.
Yeah,
But, at the end of the day, it all comes down to people
absolutely.
making smart choices about security.
It's a human element.
Yeah, for sure.
It is.
It's awareness, it's education, it's doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's pause here for a moment.
Okay.
Let all this information really sink in.
Take a moment and think about what you've learned and how it applies to your own life.
Good idea.
When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive. We'll look at how organizations approach cybersecurity,
Okay.
and we'll leave you with some thought-provoking questions to consider.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to our cybersecurity deep dive. I'm definitely feeling a lot more informed now.
That's great to hear. Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. The principles, the threats, those controls, even cryptography.
Yeah, that was mind-blowing, honestly.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. But we can only do so much as individuals, right? What about organizations? How do they approach cybersecurity in a systematic way? That's where all those frameworks came in, I guess.
Exactly. Things like ISO 27001, NIST 800, COBIT.
Right. It was a whole alphabet soup.
It can seem that way, but they're actually very helpful. Think of them like blueprints for building a strong security posture.
Okay. I like that.
They provide best practices, controls, processes that organizations can adapt to their needs.
So instead of starting from scratch, they can use these as a guide, kind of like a cybersecurity recipe book.
Exactly. It helps establish a baseline level of security.
Makes sense. Now, what about those SOC reports? Are those like a grade for cybersecurity?
They're more like a report card, giving an independent assessment of the organization's security controls.
So it's like a third party coming in and saying, yep, this company's doing security right.
Precisely. It builds trust with customers and partners.
Makes sense. There are different types of reports, right?
So there are. The most common ones are SOC1 and SOC2.
Okay.
SOC1 focuses on controls for financial reporting.
Okay.
SOC2 covers a broader range: security, availability, processing, confidentiality, privacy.
So they pick the one that fits, what they do and the data they handle.
Exactly. It's about transparency and showing they take security seriously.
But even with the best blueprints and report cards, ultimately it comes down to people, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
People making the right decisions.
Technology is only part of the equation. You need that culture of security awareness, everyone understanding their role.
Right, right. That reminds me, our materials mentioned scoping and tailoring for these frameworks. What does that even mean?
It means you don't just blindly apply a framework as is.
Okay.
You adjust it
Okay.
to fit the organization's specific needs and their risk profile.
So it's like, getting a suit tailored. You don't just buy it off the rack, you get it adjusted to fit you perfectly.
Perfect analogy. So scoping is figuring out what systems, data, and processes the framework applies to.
Okay.
A small business probably doesn't need the same level of security as a huge corporation, right?
Right, right. And then tailoring means tweaking the controls within that framework to fit their specific risks and resources.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got frameworks, reports, and tailoring it all to fit. But what about when things go wrong? We talked about incident response,
Yeah.
but how does that connect to business continuity and disaster recovery?
Think of it this way. Incident response is handling the immediate crisis, like putting out a fire. Business continuity is making sure the business can keep operating,
Yep.
even if some things are disrupted. And disaster recovery is about restoring everything afterwards, like rebuilding after that fire.
So they're connected, but each one has a different focus.
Exactly. Incident response is tactical, immediate. Business continuity is more strategic, the bigger picture.
Okay.
Disaster recovery is about getting back on your feet.
It's like having plan A, plan B, and plan C. No matter what happens, the organization can keep going.
Exactly. Resilience and preparedness.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've learned about so much, the principles, the threats, the ways to protect ourselves.
It's been a great overview.
It really have.
Cryptography, access control, incident response, business continuity, disaster recovery, we covered it all.
And it all comes back to that idea of a secure and resilient digital environment, right?
It does. And remembering that cybersecurity is not just about the technology, it's about us.
Yeah.
It's about the choices we make.
Right. Awareness, education, doing things the right way.
Absolutely. We all share responsibility for creating a safer digital world.
Well said. As we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought,
Okay.
a question for you to consider.
What's one thing you can do today to improve your own cybersecurity?
Change your password, enable that multi-factor authentication, back up your data,
All great steps.
even just learning more about the latest threats.
Every step counts.
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this cybersecurity deep dive. We hope you've learned a lot.
It's been a pleasure.
Stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay secure.
Until next time.